The first round of pogroms in the north against my wife's Igbo peoples occurred on the 29th of May, 1966. The second round occurred on the 29th of July, 1966, as part of the counter-coup in which Ironsi was murdered and replaced by General Yakubu Gowon. The third and bloodiest round of pogroms against the Igbos in the north occurred on the 29th of September 1966. You notice the coincidence of dates. 29th of May, 29th of July, 29th of September. A mass exodus of Igbos in the north to eastern Nigeria followed. As I was saying, peace talks in Aburi, Ghana in January 1967 produced what was then known as the Aburi Accord, by which all parties committed to a more federal arrangement, with each region having military control of its own area. When that compromise was reneged upon by the Gowon government, which instead announced the division of Nigeria into 12 states, the independent state of Biafra was declared on the 29th/30th of May 1967. Now you may wonder, how is a declaration made on the 29th/30th? Is because it happened at 2 a.m. on the 29th. And from my earlier submissions, you remember the dates, the 29th of May, the first round of pogroms, the second round, 29th of July, and the third round, 29th of September. So we then had this mysterious declaration of the state of Biafra at 2 a.m. on the 29th of May 1967. The war, which began in July 1967, ended with the unconditional surrender of the Biafrans on 15th of January 1970. It was a brutal war in which figures in the range of 3 million Igbos are reported to have died through a combination of bombs, bullets, and starvation. Since the end of that war, Nigeria has been moving from one political crisis to another, with military rule alternating with civilian rule. It was only as head of the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in December 2003 that Queen Elizabeth paid her one and only other visit to Nigeria during her reign. One can thus see that Nigeria's experiment with democracy in Elizabeth's time has been a story of much bloodshed and tribulation. What then of the outlook for Nigeria and Britain after Elizabeth? As we speak, the country is preparing for a winner-takes-all presidential election in February 2023. The three main candidates seem to me to be three flavors of the very same ice cream. All three, Bola Tinubu from the southwest, Peter Obi from the southeast, and Abubakar Atiku from the north, are billionaires. All have accounting stroke trading backgrounds. None brings to the table any new thinking on the underpinning constitutional problem. This is troubling at a time when, more than ever before, Nigerians understand that Nigeria is operating without a constitution. It is simply held together through the barrel of General Buhari's guns. Last week, on the 20th of October, we marked the second anniversary of the Lekki massacre of young Nigerians who were singing the national anthem. The currency, the naira, is in free fall, and the exodus of the young and talented is growing. What then can we expect in the relationship between Nigeria and Britain after Elizabeth? Here I think we must be guided by history. I turn first to words spoken by the Secretary of State for the Colonies, Oliver Littleton, Lord Chandos, as he was otherwise known, on the 21st of May, 1953, during the emergency debate on Nigeria's constitutional future, roughly a week before Queen Elizabeth's coronation. This is what he said. Recent events have shown that it is not possible for the three regions of Nigeria to work together effectively in a federation so closely knit as that provided by the present Constitution. Her Majesty's government in the United Kingdom, while greatly regretting this, considered that the Constitution will have to be redrawn to provide for greater regional autonomy and for the removal of powers of intervention by the centre in matters which can, without detriment to other regions, be placed entirely within regional competence. It is, at the same time, necessary to ensure that the common economic and defence requirements of all regions are secured. I next turn to the words of Sir Peter Smithers, who was the Parliamentary Private Secretary to the Minister of State and the Secretary of State in the Colonial Office from 1952 to 59, in the run-up to Nigeria's independence. He was also the Secretary General to the Council of Europe from 1964 to 1969. Writing in the Times on July the 15th, 1998, he said this: "Sir, during the negotiations for the independence of Nigeria, the view of the Secretary of State at that time, with which I agreed, was that in Nigeria we should attempt to put together a large and powerful state with ample material resources which will play a leading part in the affairs of the continent and the world. This was attractive, but it involved forcing several different ethnic and cultural groups into a single political structure. The negotiations were complex and very difficult. The chief problem, as I remember, relating significantly to the control of the police and the military. In the retrospect of 40 years, it is clear that this was a grave mistake, which has cost many lives and will probably continue to do so. It would have been better to establish several smaller states in a free trade area. In exculpation, it must be said that we did not then have the examples of the collapse of Yugoslavia, I knew Princess Katerina will respond to that. We did not have the examples of the collapse of Yugoslavia and of the Soviet Union before our eyes. It should now be clear for all but the willfully blind to see that it is extremely dangerous to force diverse racial and social entities into a single rigid structure, such as that which is being built upon the foundation of the Maastricht Treaty. Recent history suggests that it would be best to complete the development of the common market and to call a halt to political integration in Europe. Well, we all know about Brexit, don't we? It must follow in the retrospect of a further 24 years since Sir Peter Smithers wrote that piece to the Times, that it remains extremely dangerous to keep diverse racial and social entities in a single rigid structure, such as we see in Nigeria. When we remember that one of the claims made to justify the original British colonization project was to put a stop to the practice of human sacrifice by despotic rulers, it is a tragic irony to observe that more Nigerian lives have been sacrificed since the push for one Nigeria was started by my friend Chamberlain in 1900 than those despotic rulers could ever have taken. And as Sir Peter Smithers warned, more will continue to be sacrificed as long as this remains the agenda. What then is to be done? Since I don't believe that the relationship between Nigeria and Britain after Elizabeth is going to be left to the willfully blind, not least with a Prime Minister who has every reason to understand imperial history, what should we expect? The answer takes us back to the times of our friend, Joseph Chamberlain. It was Prime Minister William Gladstone's policy of home rule for Ireland, meaning a separate parliament with full powers to deal with Irish affairs, which led to Chamberlain's resignation from the Liberal Party on the 27th of March, 1886. He viewed Home Rule for Ireland as the weakening of Parliament's control over the United Kingdom. Gladstone's speech in the debate on the Irish Home Rule Bill makes interesting reading in relation to the political situation in today's Nigeria. This is what he said. I wish now to refer to another matter. I hear constantly use the terms unionists and separatists. But what I want to know is, who are the unionists? I want to know, who are the separatists? In Nigeria, in the current time, the equivalent labels are one Nigerianists and secessionists. Gladstone continued, but we believe, as proved by history, that where there are those disturbed relations between countries associated but not incorporated, the true principle is to make ample provision for local independence, subject to imperial unity. These are propositions of the greatest interest and importance. Gentlemen speak of tightening the ties between England and Ireland as if tightening the tie were always the means to be adopted. Tightening the tie is frequently the means of making it burst, whilst relaxing the tie is very frequently the way to provide for its durability and to enable it to stand a stronger strain. So it is true that the separation of legislatures is often the union of countries, and the union of legislatures is often the severance of countries. So the choice that will shape the relationship between Britain and Nigeria after Elizabeth is the one between the union of legislators and the severance of the ethnic groups which were thrown together to make one Nigeria, or the separation of legislators for the continued union of these groups. The bitter harvest from Nigeria's experiments with democracy during the reign of Elizabeth, coupled with the clear warnings from the Secretary of State for the Colonies in 1953, as repeated by his parliamentary private secretary in 1998, and with the greater level of awareness through social media by a new generation of Nigerians of their history, and perhaps most importantly, with the new man down the road at 10 Downing Street, I am confident that my prediction that the road ahead is more in line with Gladstone's Home Rule Bill for Ireland and a firm rejection of the One Nigeria template created by that arch-imperialist from my Highbury neighbourhood, Joseph Chamberlain. Let me conclude these remarks by sharing with you what the new Nigeria will look like. I turn to the French philosopher Rousseau, 18th century, who defined the challenge as follows. The problem is to find a form of association which will defend and protect with the whole common force the person and good of each associate, and in which each, while uniting himself with all, may still obey himself alone and remain as free as before. This is the fundamental problem which the social contract provides the solution for. I ask for Rousseau's words in relation to Nigeria to be imagined as the Orange Union, in contradistinction to the Union of the Apple. When you peel the skin of the orange, you will see the segments sitting comfortably side by side, together making the composite whole. Whereas where you peel the skin of the apple, you will see the indistinguishable mass. That Orange Union in which the ethnic groups uniting to make the whole in association, but in which, an association in which they may still obey their own priorities and remain as free as before. I conclude by inviting us to proclaim loudly, the Queen is dead. Long live the King. And might I add, long live Prime Minister Sunak.